In our daily lives, our behaviors are guided by norms as well as by ethics through sets of principles that define what is acceptable or unacceptable besides the purely legal perspective. Deviating from these codes implies consequences. But what about the digital world? Individuals and companies may not necessarily set out to engage in deliberate, unethical behaviors or outcomes. Rather, we observe that when it comes to ethics, processes in the digital world may contribute to unethical behaviors. My name is Evi Kiorri, and this is Communicating Democracy, the EuroPCom podcast on public communication. With me today I have Andreea Gorbatai, who is Associate Professor at Vlerick Business School in Brussels. She researches and teaches about the impact of technology on entrepreneurship, and she will talk to us about digital ethics. Andreea, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, do tech advances improve the world, or do they exacerbate discrimination, inequality, and polarization?
Well, I think the answer, like many things in life, is that it's complicated. As any other technology, technologies like digital technologies that you use these days have the potential to either help people and increase equality or the potential to increase the social divides and economic divides in our world.
Mm-hmm. But maybe could you give us a little bit more insights on that? Why would you say that that's happening?
Yeah. So the way I think about it is when it comes to the digital technologies and when it comes to digital ethics, generally speaking, we use different sets of rules. As you were saying in an introduction a couple of minutes ago, we use different sets of rules that we apply, systems of values of what is right and wrong, how we should be doing things. And the way these are applied sometimes is at odds between different groups of people, or sometimes is orthogonal. It's people are excited to create a new technology. They are, making it faster, making it more accurate, without necessarily paying attention to the ultimate consequences of what they create. Mm-hmm. So, generally speaking, when I think of a digital ethics more broadly, I think of to what extent it reproduces bias in society, to what extent it serves to restrict our free will or other rights that we have. So sort of in some ways restrict our dignity as human beings. And lastly, to what extent technologies create value, and this value is fairly distributed to the people to contribute in value creation.
But how do you ensure that whoever creates some sort of technology, they will maintain some sort of ethics? Is there a way that we as society can ensure that, or are we just hoping that people would want to maintain the ethics and the respect when it comes to individuals?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult question. As far as I can tell, I think there are a lot of people who have good intentions, but at the same time, it's an evolving field. Sometimes technology progresses so fast that our policies, our legislation, our understanding of what it does and how it does it is lagging. And there's a disconnect in terms of, what technologies are created and how they affect, social interactions, how they affect economic inequalities or social inequalities. So, to give you an example, people who are creating something like social media, they don't necessarily intend to keep people in front of their cell phone or in front of their computer for hours and digging into conspiracy theories or things like that. But it's a side effect of trying to maximize online engagement, right? Online engagement is a nice sounding term. It sounds like something that when you have a particular function you're optimizing we're optimizing online engagement, so you're increasing the time that people spend online. But in order to do that, you have to give them content that's more emotional, more extreme, more outrageous, and that's an unintended side effect of maximizing this. And of course, this gets maximized because a lot of these companies have a business model that's predicated on advertisement, for example. So they need to have your eyeballs stuck to the screen, but it's not always in the best interest of humans.
And you said that you need to exacerbate and you need to offer more experiences to the users to keep them engaged in your platform. But do you think that also leads to the fact that, okay, well, we already have discrimination in real life, and that discrimination is like multiplied by 5 when it comes to online platforms? Do we see that? And also, how do we tackle that?
Absolutely. I think there are 3 things that are happening in this regard. So I think what you're referring to here is sort of a subcategory of digital ethics that's more like machine learning, AI ethics. Yeah. And I think there are the first thing that happens is that when you're creating an algorithm, you are training it, you are, telling it what to do, how to classify, these are people we should hire, these are people we should reject, these are people who are, should be paid better, these are people who should be paid less. And you're training it on existing data. And our data is inherently biased. Our data from our world is, based on social systems that have certain inherent biases against minorities, against women. And when we're creating an algorithm that reifies that, it basically says this is what, that statistically that's the correct answer, it reproduces the existing inequalities. Yeah. The other thing that happens is that the person, the organization creating the algorithm is not necessarily the organization using it or the team or the individual. So you have this diffusion of responsibility that happens whereby someone creates an algorithm and it says, this algorithm is going to help you filter resumes, or it's going to help you, classify different applications. And an organization takes this algorithm and then uses it, but then if the algorithm recommends something that's biased, is it the organization's fault? Is it the fault the person who created it? Who is responsible for supervising the results of the recommendations of the algorithm, or for auditing the results? So I think that's part of it as well. And there is this tendency to think, well, it's AI, it's machine learning, so it's going to be unbiased because machines are not racist and sexist. Machines are smart.
But I think that it depends on what are you feeding the machine also.
Yes.
No?
Yes. I mean, I think the third problem that I see here, and I have many friends working in Silicon Valley, working in various tech companies, the issue is that in addition to the fact you're feeding the machine something, you're trying to maximize a particular, you have an optimization function, you're trying to reach a particular outcome. The other issue that exists is that you are trying to make that function fit the data very well. So say you kind of clean the data, but if you're fitting a function and it predicts accurately 95% of the time, the things that it's not going to predict well is usually what we call outliers, is the points in the data that are kind of weird. And what is different and, so to say, weird in the data when you're talking about people will be minorities. So it could be a function that, fits the data for 90% of the mainstream, the majority, but for minorities, half of the time it classifies you the wrong way because it's like your data is different.
And I'm sure that there are many companies out there that are facing this issue. How do they tackle it? What is the best strategy? Is there a strategy at all?
So I think we're seeing, for the past decade, I would say, we are starting to see conversations about better understanding the scope of these problems and better tackling them. Some of my friends who have created this center in San Francisco that's called Center for Humane Technology, and they've perhaps you've seen it. There's this famous movie that they put together. It's called The Social Dilemma. Now they have a movie they put online that's called The AI Dilemma that kind of outlines some of these issues. And part of the problem that you see happening with tech companies is that it's an arms race, right? Like if you're doing it, I'm going to fall behind if I'm not doing it. We need policy making, or we need some sort of coordination. And perhaps this is where the idea of having an ethical code, right? So doctors have an ethical code, like thou shall do no harm, and having some sort of ethical code.
How feasible is this, though? Because it sounds like a bit of utopic element.
I think it's hard. It does sound that the more technology we create and the farther we go, now with the ChatGPT and other AI models, the closer we get to this sort of danger, humanity endangerment situation where we need to figure out how to do it. I think it would have to be a combination of policy making from, something like the EU Parliament, EU Commission, state level, international coordination, coupled with tech companies. It's very hard, I think, for companies that are profit oriented. They have shareholders and these commitments.
But also to adopt any law that any institution will just propose. I mean, if the law would mean that, or the rules would mean that they will have to give up on a part of their profit, do you think that's feasible? I don't know.
I think it's a very difficult question to ask because a lot of these companies are built on the idea of benefiting from advertisement. So whatever gets people online, whatever gets people clicking more, whatever gets people to give you more data, right? Because all these AI models are trained on our data that we put in them. So, if people don't understand that, or if people have no way to defend themselves. I think this is where the idea of value production versus value capture comes in. And when we're using ChatGPT to play with prompts and feeding it data, it learns from what we feed it. We tell it, oh, this was not a good answer, do it again. It learns there's better answers. So this is value that we create for them, but it's not value that's being captured by us. Now, the problem with some of this is that a lot of the companies are saying, the way our technology works, our algorithm, our whatever other technologies they're using is proprietary. We have patents, and we cannot. It's the secret sauce, right? We cannot tell other people. So then you cannot really have transparency. It exposes you to people gaming the system. If you say this input is way different from that input, someone who's trying to do a search engine optimization or something will game the system. So then it's hard to have transparency, but then we need to have some sort of auditing. The same way we have auditing for accounting, we should have auditing for technology, where there is some sort of certification or some sort of standard that needs to be respected.
Great.
But it's kind of the I would say the toddler days of
first steps. Yeah. First steps towards.
Yeah.
Any concluding thoughts or something that you would like to mention?
Yeah. So, I think the two concluding thoughts I would have, and one of them is not original, one of them is from the Center for Humane Technology, is that anytime we create technologies, we are basically we basically need to follow up with creating new rights. So the examples that I can think of is the right to be forgotten, right? We created technology that increased the storage capacity that we have for our data, so then any data that you ever produce can be stored. So then you need to create a legal right that's the right to be forgotten. Nobody thought about that. Similarly, with privacy, we had people had privacy on the street and in their homes, and then all the phones now have digital cameras, so you have to have the right to privacy so that people don't post your pictures online and don't tag you and things like that. So we have to think ahead where, we have to, in the future years, we have to think, what are new ways we can protect people from what technology can do. The second thing I would say is that at the end of the day, I think of technology as a tool and, data. I'm by nature a quantitative researcher and I should by training, not by nature. When we are using data, we have to pay attention. We are using algorithms, we are using statistical functions, anything. We have to think, what does this mean? What are these data points? How is this data generated? So I think that's something that sometimes gets lost in the excitement to work with data or to create new technologies. There is a wonderful website that I refer my students to that's called We All Count, and it basically walks you through, if you're using any kind of data analytics tools, thinking of, what is the right unit of measurement? What is the way, this data is being processed? What are some biases built into the data to the end point of how is this data being communicated? And that's where the other aspect of it that we marginally touched upon comes in, which is the idea that some people benefit from technologies more than others, and it creates this digital divide, this gap where some people know how to do things, some people benefit from, in their jobs from the help of technology, while others might be replaced. So, being mindful of communicating in a way that's accessible, in a way that gives back to the community that generated the data, perhaps, is important.
Thank you, Andreea, for joining us today and shedding some light on digital ethics. And to our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Communicating Democracy. And if you want to discover more about the link between democracy and technology, check out our EuroPCom podcast series. And of course, if you like this episode, feel free to share it with your network. Thank you very much for tuning in, and until next time. This is a podcast series of the European Committee of the Regions. For more information on EuroPCom, please visit the website core.europa.eu.